We'll talk about some recent comments from Redick regarding Bucks head coach Doc Rivers and if Milwaukee might be more vulnerable than what their record reflects. And Damian Lillard had some interesting responses regarding his top 5 players in the NBA, and some think he still dreams of coming to Miami. Plus, some lingering thoughts on the All-Star Dunk Contest and rookie Jaime Jaquez Jr. All that and more in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucaneat.com. Joining me as always is longtime NBA reporter David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Got a great show for you today. We're going to talk about Damian Lillard, including Bam Adebayo and his top 5 players he'd most want to play with, and Jaime Jaquez Jr. getting snubbed in the dunk contest. But first, let's start with Redick calling out Doc Rivers on First Take. Here's the sound.
I've seen the trend for years.
What's the trend?
The trend is always making excuses. Doc, we get it. Taking over a team in the middle of the season is hard. It's hard. We get it. Just like getting traded in the middle of the season is hard for a player. We get it. But it's always an excuse. It's always throwing your team under the bus. They lose to Memphis. Oh, it's his players' fault. Memphis was playing G League guys and two-way guys. And then you look at his quotes over the weekend. Now he wants to take credit for the James Harden trade to the Clippers working out. He wants credit for that. There's never accountability with that guy. There's never accountability.
Well, let me say.
So obviously that sparked just an internet firestorm afterwards. You had Austin Rivers, Doc Rivers' son, coming out to his defense. Twitter was all ablaze with differing opinions on all of this, which I find interesting for a number of reasons, David. First of all, you know this. I'm not the biggest fan of the Redick takes. I think he comes off as patronizing quite a bit. Thinks he's smarter than everybody in the room and is the first guy to make a point that everybody's made already. But in this case, I have to agree with him. And you never really hear this come from a former player in public call out a coach like this. Redick played for Doc Rivers in LA for 4 years with the Clippers. So you don't really hear that. And then B, you don't hear this from a broadcaster who has to work on the broadcast of the games. Redick is being added to the booth with Doris Burke and Mike Breen. And there's going to be a scenario where they have to do the pre-game meeting with Doc Rivers before the broadcast. And that is going to be awkward. And that's usually why you kind of see these criticisms of coaches get limited to sort of like X's and O's and like questioning when they use a timeout and stuff like that. This is a personal attack against Doc Rivers and how it is that he goes about doing his job and relating to the people he works with. And there's so much interesting here. What stood out to you? What do you agree with, JJ?
I do agree with JJ. I think Doc's comments, we've seen this for years, and it's always been like a subtle jab. Aside from the lack of changes that he makes in game, it's not necessarily lack of preparation or anything like that, but he does kind of tend to be a little maybe one-dimensional when it comes to his actual in-game approach and refusing to make a lineup change or just make a design a play that could lead to something. He's more of the old school mentality of just kind of roll it out there and see what sticks out and what might pan out for you or not, which is part of the reason why he has struggled and has blown as many series leads as he has throughout his career. I think he's a fine coach. I think he is a top coach all time in some regards, but there's also clear limitations there. But when it comes to his media dealings, he does throw players under the bus. Like, I remember even thinking when the Sixers had added DeAndre Jordan, this was when Doc was still with Philadelphia, and they had added DeAndre. This was before he joined Denver, which has been for years now. And DeAndre was looking for a place after, I guess he left the Dallas Mavericks at that point, and he went to the Sixers. And Doc is just like saying, like, well, DeAndre's old. He can't do anything. Like, he's just talking about the player that chose to come there and sign there. And he's just not just throwing him under a bus. He's basically talking crap about him and saying he's no longer a functional NBA player. And that kind of gives into like all the different narratives that have been surrounding Jordan and things that are normally left reserved for fans on NBA on like NBA Twitter, not for a head coach. Like, I can't imagine a world. I know this might be spinning it off a little bit. I can't imagine a world in which Erik Spoelstra would ever say that about a player. Like, he could have said that about Kevin Love. Like, obviously he's older. Obviously he can't contribute to the same way he was. None of that. Like, we didn't hear any negative response from an older player.
Or even bristling against Kyle Lowry and calling and just finding new words to use. He's our Hall of Fame
QB1.
quarterback. Yeah, and it's just like, but even when he was clearly annoyed about Kyle Lowry, stating in the media publicly that he plans to be the starting point guard, and Erik Spoelstra, well, that's news to me, but he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, and I would expect nothing less with his confidence, and he's got a championship mentality, heat culture, jargon, blah, blah, blah.
What would Doc's response have been? What would Doc's response? He's like,
well, that's up
Kyle
to me.
can expect whatever he wants, but that's not his choice,
Right.
Maybe if it was 10 years ago, we would have started him. It's like, okay.
Well, that's the interesting thing about Doc, too, is he's always been so forthright with the media that he has gotten a
pass.
A pass seems strong because he has gotten fired and he has gotten criticized in the media.
But that's not our choice, That's not media choice.
No, but he's gotten criticized in the media a little bit. And it's not like he gets fired and everybody. It's not like a sudden rush to be like, oh, they did the wrong thing here. Like, he kind of gets fired in the media. It's like, yeah, it was probably about time for Doc Rivers to go. But he is friendly with the media, and he does get a little bit of a pass during the tenure of the team that he's coaching. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. When it comes to former players, wasn't his whole thing. You're right about the X's and O's thing. That's not his strong suit. And he was always the guy that got along with the players. He was a player's coach. He was the star whisperer. That was the whole thing. And it just seems time after time, and it hasn't always been the case, but basically since the end of his Celtics tenure. And then it got a little iffy, and there was some good times and there were some bad times in LA with the Clippers.
Yep.
And he did step up during the Donald Sterling thing, and that was real, and he deserves credit for that. But since then, it's been really iffy with getting along with the stars. So if you're not going to be the star guy who's the star whisperer, and you're not going to necessarily be the strongest X's and O's coach, we're not really sure what you're doing here. And I listened to on the Bill Simmons podcast too, and he loves to give himself a lot of credit for things that happened 15 years ago. And some of that, and so he obviously has a big ego as well. Yes. And look, I'm not anti big ego. Have a big ego. You do what you got to do to get to the highest level of your field. But yeah, I mean, to your point, the excuse making, the lack of accountability, that's where JJ Redick is right. And that's where it is in such stark contrast to Erik Spoelstra, who bristles at the point of the other night, hey, your team is shorthanded. How do you approach this game? And he goes, that locker room would be insulted that you just called us shorthanded. Attacking the reporter who said that, who is a completely legitimate question. And you are literally down fewer players than you have rostered. That is the definition of shorthanded. And he was like, no, we are not shorthanded. We have enough. We have enough. Like all this.
They could have 4 active players, and Spo would say, no, those 4 players have worked their ass off to get to this point. We will find a way to win. It's like, okay.
The NBA is like, by rule, you have to forfeit the game. And he goes, that is an insult to the work we have put in to this season. Like, Spo, it's a rule. You don't have enough players. He's like, I'll go out there. I don't care. We got AC and Karan on the bench. We're gonna put them out there. Or not AC anymore, but he's in Memphis. But I'm gonna call him
Quinny.
Quinny could go out there. It's an insult to Quinny that you say we don't have enough players.
Malik Allen is as low post dominant as you can find a player in his 50s. I mean,
we like the matchup for him. Yeah, I mean, you have the other day, Doc Rivers going through the schedule of their first losses. What Milwaukee went like 1-6 or something like that in their first few games with Doc Rivers. And he's like, well, against Memphis, we were down like this. And then that game was the second night of a back-to-back. And then this one and this one. You would never, ever hear that. And the lack of accountability from Doc Rivers, I think, is real. And it is, and I think it has to make Heat fans, if you don't appreciate Erik Spoelstra already, then you're lost. I don't know what to tell you. Right. But you ought to. Right. And you hear this kind of stuff. And you said this before we started recording. You couldn't even imagine Erik Spoelstra ever saying this, or former players or the media criticizing Erik Spoelstra in this way. It would be unfathomable.
Absolutely. Like, I mean, I mentioned even like, LeBron James, for as sour a note as he left the Miami Heat with, has always been complimentary of Spo, despite the original 9-8 and the bristling and the idea that he wanted Pat Riley to step down as and become the coach. It's like he has always said such great things about Erik Spoelstra and helping him unlock his greatness here in Miami and helping coach them to a championship. He's always respected Spo publicly. He's always said nothing but great things. Like, I can't think of another player, an older player or a player no longer on the Heat, that would say anything negative about Erik Spoelstra. Like, you got Solomon Hill still kind of pining for a return to Miami. You got Andre Iguodala, who has played for a top 15 coach and Steve Kerr, and still talks about the way they do things in Miami and Erik Spoelstra and the preparedness and everything else. There's never any excuse making. And it's such an interesting contrast between those two coaches and their different styles. And just, even Doc going, I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this job. It's like, well, why the hell did you take it? And why are you here now whining about it? Like, you're getting paid a lot of money. You were getting paid as a consultant. You basically watched them bring the axe down on Adrian Griffin's head, and they're like, well, I guess it's okay. And I guess I go ahead and take the job. And now you're just doing nothing but complaining about it. Yeah, there's a challenge to it. Figure it out. You're the guy. You're the coach now. You took this job. You got to figure it out. I don't know. It's unbelievable. Yeah. But I wonder also, like, all this talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, are they more vulnerable as a result? Because obviously Doc has whatever in-game limitations he's historically had. But is there more tension in that Milwaukee locker room than what we might expect?
It's a great question, and it's one we'll dig into after this. Coming up on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. You pick more than or less than the projections on 2 to 6 players, and you watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. They've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and staff types. That's what you're looking for, and that's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And right now, if you go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA, you get a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Before we get to Jaime Jaquez getting snubbed in the dunk contest and what Damian Lillard had to say about who he would like to play with, who is currently playing in the NBA. You asked a great question. The Milwaukee Bucks, based on all of these things that Doc Rivers is saying in the media, is that team vulnerable? And I think it's a very good question. I got to say yes. Like, I thought things were so bad under Adrian Griffin that Doc Rivers could only be an improvement. And I think defensively, they have bought in more. They seem to know what they're doing schematic-wise, where that was just a complete mess under Griffin. The transition stuff has been cleaned up and is starting to get better. But offensively, it still doesn't really work. It works because you have Giannis and Dame, and maybe that's just the plan. And, hey, that's not really a bad plan. Hey, we got Giannis, we got Dame. These guys are both capable of going off on any kind of – like, offensively, we'll be all right. Doc Rivers was brought in to fix the defense, and I think the process has been good there. Yeah. But, like, that's not good enough. When you make a trade the way that you did as the Milwaukee Bucks – trading a championship core member in Drew Holiday and going all in for a guy like Damian Lillard, like, the expectation isn't, hey, let's be a little bit better defensively based on where we were to start the season. The expectation is go win a championship, because that's why you fired Mike Budenholzer in the first place, hired Adrian Griffin, fired him. You've made 3 coaching changes in the last handful of months with the idea of we're going to win a championship with Giannis. We're going to go get him another ring. And so, yeah, I think if I'm a Bucks fan, I am nervous as all hell about what I'm hearing from Doc Rivers, and I don't know if he's the guy that can lead this team. And maybe ultimately it's not on Doc. Maybe it's just simply on Giannis as that star player. There's some other things going on with that roster. Damian Lillard has not had the best year, but yeah, I don't know that I'm like super confident in my team because of Doc Rivers if I'm a Bucks fan.
Yeah, I think Bucks fans have become a little defensive. Like, even bringing up that idea has them saying, no, everything's fine. It's not that big a deal. Downplaying JJ Redick as a player, as a commentator, etc. I think that's kind of it's clearly a defense mechanism there where you refuse to admit the truth, that there might be chinks in the armor and what Milwaukee has been able to build this season. So I think, there were existing problems to begin with. Like, Dame is Dame is a very special and unique player, and for everything that he can do offensively, and there have been ups and downs in terms of what his production has been, or at least in terms of what the expectations for that level of production. But he gives up a lot defensively as well. So you have to have the right team around him in order to compensate for what Dame lacks defensively. And I don't know that Milwaukee is that. I think there's still, there's some issues regarding roster construction, and then to have it magnified publicly in the media by Doc Rivers' comments about what a challenge it is and how difficult everything is. And just, again, it's not, I think players are smart enough and self-empowered enough where those things don't necessarily drive them. But I have to say, I mean, I've seen the opposite of that an effect in Miami, where you have the power of, putting it out there and saying what you actually believe, like a manifesto, a kind of like a mantra that you repeat to yourself all the time. This is who we are. Yep. This is who we want to be. We'll keep getting better. We're going to achieve this. The Heat culture in that aspect is all about accountability. It's all about setting a high standard and then working towards achieving that answer, that accomplishment. And then I don't know if Milwaukee has that same kind of integrity in place there. They might falter because of what Doc's saying. It does make them vulnerable to a certain degree.
And I'm not worried about Giannis. That guy is on a revenge tour of some kind for some reason this year. Like, yes. That guy has been playing at an MVP level and carrying that team in a lot of ways. And as much as Damian Lillard has struggled and the three-point shooting numbers are down and some of the metrics are down and the defensive things that you said are absolutely real and very apparent, even more than they were in Portland, because Portland was losing games in Portland and it didn't matter. But like, those guys are going to be just fine. I don't doubt Damian Lillard in a playoff setting. He'll be effective. He'll be a value add. Giannis is going to be awesome in the playoffs. He always is, unless he's hurt. And that's it. And but Doc Rivers, like, his job goes beyond those two guys. In fact, most of his job is beyond those two guys. Even Brook Lopez, he'll be fine. Chris Middleton, can he get healthy? That's another big question and concern that the Bucks have. But where's the other rotation guys in this? He has basically put Marjon Beauchamp on ice. He's put Andre Jackson on ice, and these are guys that have given him some good minutes. Can he find like a top 8 or 9 a top 7 or 8 in a rotation and empower those guys the way that Erik Spoelstra is able to empower the guys in the middle and at the end of Miami's rotation? Because that's what can kind of push you forward, especially in an Eastern Conference that has the Boston Celtics, the reigning champion Miami Heat, the Philadelphia 76ers, who could still be dangerous when Joel Embiid comes back. They've lost to the Pacers multiple times this year. Like, what happens if they get pulled into them with that into a series with the Pacers in the first round? Like, I'm not feeling great about that if I'm a Bucks fan. So yeah, Damian Lillard was asked during All-Star Weekend by a sneaker TikToker, which is how we get news now. Apparently, I don't know. This is made the rounds on the internet. What 5 current players would make up Dame's dream team? And Damian Lillard said, and by the way, he was not asked, hey, you cannot include current teammates.
Right.
That was not a stipulation. Right. And Dame said Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and Bam Adebayo. David, let's dust off an old segment. Big deal, little deal, or no deal?
I'm going to go with a big deal. I honestly, again, I thought this is one of the things I saw Bucks fans downplaying a little bit, like, oh, he won a gold medal. There's a friendship there. It's like, yeah, there's a friendship there. There's a gold medal. That's why he wanted to come to Miami. These are important things, and it's clearly important to Dame. So I think there's a huge level of respect for what Bam does there. I think it's really interesting. He did not mention his own MVP level teammate in Giannis Antetokounmpo.
That was the one. I mean, maybe even like, if we want to go friendship, his best friend in the league is CJ McCollum. He's still in the league last I checked. He didn't mention CJ, so it's not just a friendship-based thing. He chose Bam over Nikola Jokic, over Joel Embiid, over Anthony Davis, elite or arguably elite better players than Bam. And it didn't include Giannis. Giannis might be the best player in the NBA, depending on who you ask. I still think it's Jokic, but he's top 2. And he didn't include Giannis.
Yeah. It's a top 3 player. You're like, he's not even in my top 5. It's like, that's unbelievable.
You could have Giannis at center.
Yeah. I mean, just could have got anybody. Like, I don't know. It's just really interesting. I think it just speaks about how much respect he has for Bam and a friendship there. Again, I think that's an important thing, but also a high level of regard for what Bam does as a player. So it's just, I think a lot of Heat fans have read into it. And I think given everything that's happened, and I'm sure we'll hear at some point from Chris Haynes, because it's just all played out very badly. Like, it's clear that Dame wanted to come to Miami. Like, Dame's in the process of, some personal issues off the court too, and there's a lot going on there. He never wanted to come to Miami, and I know that Heat fans are going to read into. I'm sorry, yeah, he never wanted to come to Milwaukee. I know that he's Heat fans are going to read into everything, but I think it all adds up in the right direction. Like, he clearly wanted to be in Miami.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And he's been very open about that too. He's like, I never wanted to come to Milwaukee, and now that I'm here, I see what great of organization it is, and I get to team up with a great player like Giannis and blah, 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 blah,
Yeah, what are you going to say at that point? You've already been traded.
You could put him in your top 5. You could say that. I mean, it's crazy. And by the way, I don't mean any of this to poo-poo Bam Adebayo. I know a lot of star players would love to play with Bam because he plays the game the right way. He's a willing
makes things easier for you.
Yeah. And so and that's probably where Damian Lillard is coming from, because he's done the pickup games with Bam, and they have a great relationship. And you mentioned the Olympics, and that was a big deal. But and by the way, when I had this whole story prepared for All You Can Heat on had Damian Lillard gotten traded to Miami, I was ready to just push the button on it, kind of going through their Olympic game highlights together and breaking down that film and how that could translate to the Miami Heat this season. And that story will never see the light of day, obviously. Or maybe it still could. Because if Milwaukee flames out, let's say this Doc Rivers thing goes south, they flame out first round and out, boom, they lose to the Pacers, the 6th seed or whatever it is. Like they flame out in the first round of the playoffs. Changes are going to have to be made. Damian Lillard's not going to be happy. Doc Rivers will be doing more podcasts next year. Giannis signed the extension.
How can you win when your point guard only shoots 35% from 3? It's like, all right, Doc.
Yeah, I can only do so much.
On the roster.
Yeah. We had Patrick Beverley. I don't think it would be unrealistic that Damian Lillard is playing somewhere else next year. And if he were to get traded, and I'm not even saying demand to get traded, like, could the Heat get him and he would not cost what he would have cost coming from Portland? Like, Portland might have been asking for Jaime Jaquez Jr. Milwaukee would not be getting Jaime Jaquez Jr. My question to you when we come back, I'll ask it, is would you even want Damian Lillard?
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes you just need the opportunity to get something off your chest, whether it's big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you, and it's important to let that out, especially as someone who's unbiased in your life. So today, I think if you haven't started to consider therapy, maybe it's time that you did, because there's a lot that affects us on a daily basis. And with a therapist, especially with somebody that you choose and that fits your schedule and is the right person for you, you'll feel much more comfortable by talking about some of those things that you might not feel comfortable talking to about anybody else. That's where therapy really comes into play. And it really gives you an opportunity to work through some of the things that you've been thinking or feeling. Just have a sounding board where you can kind of relay that information to it and maybe get some positive feedback that can help you make actual changes in your life. So if you've been thinking about trying therapy, then give BetterHelp a chance. Again, it's really easy to find a therapist. You just go to their website, you find somebody that's tailored to your schedule. And if you need to make a change for whatever reason, you're not comfortable with your therapist, or maybe your schedule changes and you need to find somebody else, then you can make that change free of charge. And everything takes place very, very quickly. And you'll find somebody that can help you. Therapy can be different for everybody, but if you're thinking about trying therapy, then give BetterHelp a chance. BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. If you go there right now, you'll get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Everydayers, make sure you tune in for our next episode, going all in on Jaime Jaquez Jr. My story for The Ringer came out about him on Tuesday. We'll dive into that. Plus, David caught up with Jaime in Indianapolis for All-Star Weekend. We'll play you snippets, preview that interview, as well as post the interview on our audio-only platforms. Of course, you can always listen to Locked On Heat on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can reach us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. But let's talk a little bit about Jaime right now. We're going to talk about the dunk contest because we didn't get a chance to get to it on our earlier show this week. But David, you were there in Indianapolis. I didn't watch the game. I didn't watch the dunk contest live, but I saw all the highlights the next morning. And it is clear to me that Jaime got snubbed. And I don't think that Jaime had the best dunk contest showing. I'm not saying that he should have won, but he should have definitely gotten past the first round. And Jaylen Brown should have been eliminated in the first round. And I think I won't go so far as to say the fix was in, but I won't not say it because they wanted their only all-star, right? Oh my God, Jaylen Brown saving the dunk contest.
Right.
He's the lone all-star in it. And they kind of needed Jaylen Brown to get to the final as almost proof of concept, even if he didn't deserve it, of, hey, all-stars can win this thing. And he didn't. Ultimately, he lost to McClung, right? But
yes, he did.
I don't know, man. I thought Jaime was much better than Jaylen Brown, and I thought he got snubbed. I really did. I think he deserved to go to round 2.
I agree. I think there was a little bit of an unknown about Jaime, especially in Indianapolis and where that fan base there. So there wasn't like there was a large clamoring to see what he could do. I've seen the reaction from Kenny Smith, and I wonder whether or not there was just like maybe a level of discomfort regarding Jaime honoring his Mexican heritage and you know, the LED court and everything else like that. To me, anyway, it seemed like a little busy and it kind of detracts from what you're trying to accomplish. I know you can do cool things with it and put pictures and put different images and things like that. Like Jaime, you know, not only did he show the Mexican flag, but he also paid tribute to former NBA Mexican players. And so that just makes things a little bit busier. So you're trying to, just from a visual standpoint, you're trying to watch everything that's going on and you're watching him try to attempt this.
And it didn't seem like Kenny knew like to look at the court based on wherever they were. He probably just
they were sitting down in a way where they can't see it.
Yeah. And so like Jaime's just standing there on the sideline waiting for this like highlight reel to go by. And everybody's like, what's going on? Like, why is this taking so much time?
Right.
So I get that.
It's for the fans. It's for people watching at home that can see the court play out the way it does.
But apparently not for the judges or the broadcast.
But not for the judges that are sitting on the court itself. So they can't see anything other than just like lights moving around and stuff like that. It's a huge distraction. I'm not a big fan.
That's why I think Jaylen Brown, he played to the judges, and I'll give him credit for this because he went full like, hey, like I'm going to actually have zero creativity, and I'm just going to do your guys' dunks. And
it was the silliest thing, like his half-assed D Brown attempt, like.
That would be a compliment. Calling it half-assed would be a compliment. He didn't do it. I know. He literally didn't do it. He did the fake no-look pass where you literally stare at the guy passing the ball and then look away as you're running away from the player. Like, he just did a normal dunk.
His eyes. Yeah, he tried covering his eyes and did like this dab. It was like this really uncomfortable, awkward
his eyes were
to watch.
Open the entire time until he.
And it was worth it though. It was worth it to hear the Indianapolis faithful boo the hell out of Jaylen Brown, and maybe that's just because they don't like this. Yes, they did. At every opportunity, they booed him. Very interestingly, I'm not sure if it was an anti-Celtics thing, which it doesn't matter to me. I'm all for it. I love it. He was getting booed pretty loudly. I think it was also after the scores came out. It was like, are you kidding me? Like this guy did not earn those at all.
I mean, you had Jaime come out, dunks over Shaquille O'Neal. You had Obi Toppin's brother come Jacob Toppin, and dunk over Obi Toppin, who's also a very tall person. Not as tall as Shaq, but a very tall person.
Right.
You had Matt McClung come out and get the YouTube guy involved.
He had an interesting dunk where he.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, that was the best dunk where he jumped over and threw it up to himself. I mean, that was insane. Right. That was the best dunk.
He like bobbled purposely the ball on purpose so that he's in midair.
He picked it up and threw it back to himself. Yeah, has to catch it and so that was awesome. That was an awesome dunk. Everybody jumped over somebody standing up, and then in the first round. Everybody did, except for Jaylen Brown. He just did a dunk in his first round dunk, and the second one dunked over a YouTuber sitting in a chair.
Yep.
He didn't even dunk over Shaquille O'Neal standing up. He dunked over a YouTuber who I would imagine is less than 6 feet tall, sitting in a chair, holding a cell phone.
Less. It wasn't a bar stool. It was a chair, folding chair. It was like far less than 6 feet.
Yeah, it was folding. Yeah, no, it's upside. Like even standing up, the YouTuber is probably not even 6 foot compared to Shaq, who's 7'1", and he's standing in a folding chair. So we're talking about like I'm not gonna lie, man. I think I could clear that guy standing in a folding chair. I'm actually I could jump. But it was so uncreative. You mentioned the fake no look thing. Yeah. He should have been eliminated so fast.
Yeah.
And the fact that he moved on past Jaime is insane. It's insane, and I think Jaime got snubbed. It was always going to be one of Jaime. Matt McClung deserved to win it. He was always going to advance. It was going to be one of Jaime or Jacob Toppin was going to get eliminated in the first round, and they cut Jaime out.
Yep.
And that's not even an anti-Jacob Toppin thing. I think both of them should have moved past Jaylen.
Yeah, I think I've got to give credit to Jalen in the sense that, like, as an all-star, he's not obligated to perform this, and I guess he did
Boo.
want to help. I think that's one of the
Not giving credit to that.
issues that people have brought up is that it doesn't have any kind of big name attached to it. But you know what? I think one of the best dunk contests in recent history had Derrick Jones Jr. and Aaron Gordon and
Levine.
Zach Levine, and they're not big names.
They
were
weren't
top
back
draft
then.
picks.
No.
Yeah.
But Levine
No,
made a big name for himself after that.
as a
right?
dunker, right? As a big dunker, right? So I mean, he was a top draft pick in Minnesota who didn't win a lot. It's like he wasn't a big name either. You just got to have the right guys with the right level of athleticism and creativity, and those, I mean, they weren't there. Like McClung is a good dunker in terms of like his creativity and everything else like that.
And powerful.
But but he's just so undersized, which I guess makes it all the more impressive.
It does.
I would say he should continue to be in a slam dunk contest, but you've got to find the guys that just have that kind of athleticism and are willing to do it. They have to be willing to do it, and that's a big thing. So Jalen, kudos to him for attempting it, but the dunks themselves were trash.
Yeah, I give him no credit. It's like giving a millionaire credit for paying his taxes. I give you're supposed to do it. You're an all-star. I give you zero credit for competing in the dunk contest. I discredit the other all-stars not doing it, but I'm not going to give you credit because you're doing something that can help your brand and all that stuff. You're at the All-Star weekend. Like, I'm not giving you any credit for this. The dunk contest is ruined. It's been ruined for a long time. I don't really care because I don't even watch it. I don't watch it. I don't care.
No, I know, but it's not ruined. Like, I mean, the one in Chicago in 2020, right before the pandemic, like that was a damn good showing by Derrick Jones Jr. That was only 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not. You just gotta find the right guys.
Really, maybe it's not.
You gotta find the right guy. I think the thing is, like, we talked about this on Locked On NBA. You've got to put the 3-point contest last because that's actually competitive. Like, you're actually have something to compete as opposed to just some.
Well, it's one and done. I love how it's just one and done. Like, you can't redo your shot from the 3-point contest the way you could redo a missed dunk.
Right.
No, I look. We discussed it too on Locked On NBA going into All-Star Weekend, and it was like, you need somebody like Jaylen Brown to come out, but you need a star. Jaylen Brown's not a star. He gets paid like a star. He's an all NBA appearance, but he's not a celebrity. Nobody really likes.
You take that back. Jaylen Brown's the best.
Yeah. Even Celtics fans would admit that he's not. All right. That'll do it. We're not done talking about Jaime Jaquez Jr. In fact, we'll have another episode coming up. We're going to dive into Jaime's season and what we expect from the second half of his season. We'll talk about the Ringer story that I wrote about him that came out on Tuesday, and we'll give you a sneak peek of David's interview with Jaime from All-Star Weekend in Indianapolis on the next show. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day.